Welcome to Kelly Rene Everyday, where I'm here dedicated to teaching you the fundamentals of crochet through beginner-friendly projects like we see here today. Today, I am excited to show you just how easy it is to create the Vanilla Ripple Blanket, which is an application of the Granny Ripple Stitch, which is totally beginner friendly. And this is only a 1-row repeat, so it doesn't take long to get the hang of it and start creating this beautiful boho inspired blanket. You'll notice that we do have these tassels on the end. My video will also show you exactly how to make these and attach these so you create this nice finished look. Now, the free pattern for this and many other projects is on my website at kellyreneeveryday.com. I'll make sure to have that in a link down below. Please stick around and check out my other beginner-friendly projects here on my channel, and I would love for you to subscribe so that you can get notifications when I upload new projects. Also, a like or a share would be appreciated, and if you end up having any questions as you go along here, please put those down in the comments below because I will be sure to get them answered for you. Now, let's talk supplies. You are going to need a total number of 12 balls to achieve the same size that I have here of the Wool Ease Thick and Quick yarn. This happens to be in the color Fisherman, and on each one of my skeins here, there's 106 yards. This is considered a super bulky yarn, so really any super bulky yarn will do. So again, 12 balls of this. There's going to be 11 for the body and then an extra to create the tassels. You're also going to need a crochet hook. Now, I used an USN 15. This is a 10mm hook. This happens to be a Susan Bates, but any 10mm hook will do. You're going to need a scissors and then a yarn needle. Now, in addition, this is kind of on the side, I used for my tassels a book, and this particular book I wrapped around to create the length of the tassel that I need. So I'll go over those details as well. So just kind of something that that we can get the correct length of our tassels. But again, I'll go into those details a little bit later. Additionally, another item that is really handy is a bowl, and a bowl is really nice to put your yarn into in order to allow it to kind of move around. This way it's not flopping all over the place. I really love the That's a Bowl, which is a Tupperware brand. I like Tupperware, so it's a dual use for me. I use it as a yarn bowl, but then I also use it for other things in my kitchen. I'll leave a link for all of the supplies that I have here down below so that if you would like to purchase those items, you can do so easily, through those links. So I think that is everything that we need, and we are going to be starting next. The blanket that I created here is 48 inches wide and 67 inches long. So that's about 4 feet by just over 5.5 feet long. Now, to create this size, as I told you, we need 11 balls to create the body and then an additional ball of yarn to create our tassels here. Now, as far as how wide this is going to be and the multiples of the base chain that we're going to create, I want to look at one of our peaks here. I'm going to call this a peak and this a valley. So this is going to be one of our what we call the stitch multiples. Now, to achieve a peak and a valley like we see here, we need 18 stitches. So our base chain is going to be in multiples of 18, and then we're going to add 1 at the end. Okay, now you'll notice that as we look here, each one of these peaks and valleys is about 8 inches wide. So that helps you to determine if you want to make this wider than 48 inches or if you want to make it narrower, then you're going to do it in multiples of 18, which one of these sections is going to be 8 inches wide. So that helps you to determine. So in my case, I used 6 peaks. So I multiplied that by 18 and then added 1, and that was my base chain. If you wanted 5, you would take 18 times 5 and then add 1, and that's going to be your base chain for your foundation. So it's very customizable as we go along. So now we are ready to get started. Our foundation chain to achieve the 4-foot wide blanket is going to be 109 chains. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to make it shorter and I am going to do 2 peaks and valleys. The 109 achieves 6 peaks and valleys. So the first things first, we are going to put our yarn on the hook. So I'm going to get a little close here so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay. Once I have my yarn on my hook with a slip knot, I'm simply going to chain by yarning over and pulling through. Yarning over, pulling through. And that's 2, 3, and now I'm going to continue and I'm going to create multiples of 18 for my blanket. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So that represents one peak and valley. I'm going to do another one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. That's 2 peaks. And you would continue going along in multiples of 18 for however many peaks you want. Again, you would do 6 peaks to achieve the same size I have here. I am going to now end mine just for the purpose of this video. So I encourage you to stop this video, create your chain for your multiples of 18 plus 1, and then come back and I will show you what we'll do next. Now I have my multiples of 18 plus 1 on my foundation chain. I am ready to create my first row, which is going to be slip stitches all the way along, starting in the second chain from my hook. So I am going to go directly into the second chain from my hook. My loop is coming out of the first chain. So the second chain, which is right here, is going to be the chain that I'm going to go into. So I'm going directly in, I'm going to yarn over and pull that loop directly through the loop on my hook. So again, another slip stitch into the next one. So next chain, yarn over, pull through, and continue to pull through the loop on your hook. So that was my second slip stitch. Pull through and through again. And the reason I do this on my first row is this creates a little bit more substantial, nice looking edge on my blanket instead of having the chains that kind of get elongated, especially when we're putting multiple stitches, as you're going to find that we're going to do, into the chains. So I add this very first row of just slip stitches, and it just makes a nice even looking edge, a nice finished off edge. So I'm going to continue that all the way to the very end, and we'll have a total of 108 stitches then, slip stitches, on the end of that first row. So I'm going to let you finish that up, stop the video, and then I will be back for getting started on our next row. Now I'm to the end of my row that I just put slip stitches in each one of those foundational chains. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to turn. I am not going to do any turning chains, okay? What I'm going to do now is I am going to do my first, what we call a granny cluster, into the 5th stitch from my hook. So the stitch that it's coming out of right now, my loop is coming out of, that's the first stitch. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th is right here. Okay, so I am going to do a granny cluster, which is 3 double crochets. So I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to start my stitch by yarning over, and I'm going to go under both loops. Okay, I'm going to show you under both loops of the 5th stitch. 5th stitch, 5 stitches from my hook. I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to pull up a loop. I'm going to have 3 loops on. I'm going to yarn over, just pull through 2, and then yarn over one more time and pull through the last 2. So I've got 1 double crochet in the 5th stitch from the end, okay? Then I'm going to do 2 more, and that's going to go into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up that loop, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. So I've got now 1, 2 granny clusters in that same, I have 2 double crochets in that one stitch. To make a granny cluster, I need 3 of them. So 1 more, I'm going to go directly in, yarn over, I've got 3 on, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So 1, 2, 3 double crochets into the 5th stitch from the end. No turning chains on this first row, okay? Now what we're going to do is we are going to skip 2 stitches and we're going to do another granny cluster, 3 double crochets into the next stitch. So now to find the stitches. Now, something about the slip stitch is that it's kind of tipped forward. So on your right side, you're seeing those braids happen. What you have to do is you have to kind of turn this over, and the stitch that I went into was right there. So this V right here is the first one that I'm going to skip, the second one, and my third stitch is what I'm going to do another granny cluster into. So skip 2, and I'm going to granny cluster into the third. So I'm going to put my back in. I'm going to yarn over, skip 2, and go into the third under both V's. Yarn over, pull up the loop, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. So 2 more double crochets into that very same stitch. Okay, so another granny cluster. I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to skip 2. So I turn this over on the back. Here's the one it's coming out of. So I'm going to skip, skip, and I'm going to put in another granny cluster right into that third stitch from where I'm at. So I'm going to yarn over, skip, skip, and I'm going to go under both V's, and I'm going to pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. I'm going to do that 2 more times into that same stitch. Okay, so again, here's my granny cluster with 3 double crochets. Okay, when you look at my pattern, I refer to granny clusters, and that means 3 double crochets. Now, this is going to create our first peak. So at the top here, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then I'm going to do another granny cluster back into the same stitch that we just created the last granny cluster in. So I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to do 3 double crochets for a second granny cluster into that same stitch at what we're going to find out is our first peak. So see what happened here. Okay, see what happened here. I went up, chain 3, and then now it's going to start going down. Okay, so that's how we make our peak. So there's a granny cluster, a chain 3, and a granny cluster all in that same stitch. Okay, I'm going to go put back in here. And now we're going to continue on where we're going to tip it back over. Okay, I'm coming out of this stitch right here. So my next one is going to be the first one I'm going to skip, second one, and I'm going to do a granny cluster in that third stitch. So skip, skip, granny cluster. So that means I'm going to put 3 double crochets into that same stitch. To grab some more yarn here. And 3. Okay, now I'm going to do that. I'm going to skip again. 1, 2, 1, 2, and then in the third one, another granny cluster, 3 double crochets. And 3. Now, this puts us where we're going to create a valley. Okay, so I went up to my peak, I'm coming down. So I am now going to skip 5, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the 6th one right here, okay, skip 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in that 6th one, a granny cluster. So I'm going to yarn over, go in, yarn over. And what I like to do is kind of pinch these 2 together so I can yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, because I'm kind of going across a lot of stitches. So you're going to notice that pulled it together, and now this is going to be my first valley. So 2 more double crochets into that same stitch to create our granny cluster. Okay, and now like you can see, now we're heading back up, okay, to another peak. So this is our first granny cluster. We're going to skip 2, 1, 2, and we're going to put our granny cluster in the third from our hook. So go underneath both, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, and that's our third double crochet for a second granny cluster. Now we're going to do that same thing. We're going to skip 2 and we're going to granny cluster into the third one. This is going to be the start of our peak. Okay, let me get a little bit more yarn here again. And 2 and 3. Now, because we're going to generate our peak, we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to do another granny cluster right back in. Okay. Oopsie. 2. There we go. And one more to create that second granny cluster in that peak. All right. So where we're at right now, okay, we went up, came down, and we went back up. Now what you're going to do is you're going to continue that same pattern until you get to the very end of yours. Okay, so if you are following along with the same size, you're going to have 6 peaks and valleys, and then you are going to come close to the end. Now to end the row, we're going to skip 2. We're going to put our granny cluster in our third. Okay. Okay. Then we're going to skip 2 and we're going to go in our third. Okay. And there's still going to be 1 stitch left, and that's exactly where you want to be. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to put a double crochet in the very last stitch. There's 1 stitch left here on the very end, and we're simply going to put 1 double crochet in there to end our row. Oops, let me get underneath both of those. Sometimes that first one is a little tough, so I'm pushing kind of hard to get into that one. Make sure that you're nice and loose on your slip stitches because sometimes they do get a little hard to put in. So again, go up to the top, chain 3, double crochet, 2 granny clusters into the same with the chain 3 between. You're going to come down 1, 2 double granny clusters, and then you're going to skip 5 and you're going to granny cluster into this one to create the valley. Then you're going to do another granny cluster, and then you're going to do your peak at the top here, granny cluster, chain 3, granny cluster, and then you're going to come back down. And then when you end each one of your rows, it's going to be a double crochet in the last stitch. Now, we are now going to turn and we're ready to do row number 3. And row number 3 is going to be our repeat row. So the foundation kind of set us up, okay, for the counts that we needed, but now it's going to be really easy to duplicate here. So to turn, I need to chain 4, 2, 3, 4, and then I am going to turn, okay? Now what we're going to do is we are going to find the first granny space, and that's going to be between our 2 granny clusters. So not the space on the end here. I'm going to skip over that space, but now here's our first granny cluster, our second granny cluster, the space right between. We are going to do a granny cluster right between there. So yarn over, 3 double crochets into the space, not the stitch, but the space. Yarn over, second double crochet, third double crochet. So a granny cluster in that space. Now I'm going to find my next space. My next space is between the next 2 granny clusters, so it's right here. So I'm going to do another granny cluster right in there. So this is my second granny cluster on row number 3. Okay. To pull some more yarn out for me. There we go. Okay. Now I'm heading up to my peak. So in my peak, I'm going to make another peak. So I'm in this space where I have my 3 chains. I'm going to start with a granny cluster, 3 double crochets, and then I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1 more granny cluster right back into that chain 3 space from the previous row. There it is. So now I've got a new peak right on top here. All right, now I'm going to continue on. You're going to notice that I'm going to find my next granny space, and that's going to be between these two granny clusters right here. So right in this space right here, they're really easy to find. So I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to do my 3 double crochets into that granny space. Oopsie. Okay. And then now I've got 1, 2 coming down. I need to make a third one right into this space right here. So that's going to be my next granny cluster. So again, we're looking for spaces. We're not counting the stitches anymore. And then now I am down to my valley. What I'm going to do is I am not going to go into the valley. I'm going to skip over the valley, and I'm going to do my granny cluster into the next space. So you skip over your valley and then you go into the next one, and that'll pull this together for another valley. So I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to go skip, and I'm going to go over here, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through, and then 2 more double crochets for another granny cluster in between here. Okay. So now you'll notice that that pulled this part together. And now I'm going to continue looking for those spaces and putting my granny clusters in. So here's another space. So another granny cluster. 2, always 3 double crochets in those spaces. And now I'm up here to another peak. So I'm going to granny cluster, chain 3, granny cluster. So 2. You start getting pretty fast about it. I'm not trying to go fast here, but I want you to kind of see the rhythm. So 3 double crochets, chain 3, and then another 3 double crochets into that chain 3 space for another peak. Okay. So here we are. Now to finish this off, I'm going to put granny clusters in the next 2, okay? So I'm going to yarn over, 3 double crochets in that next granny cluster space. Sorry, my yarn is not cooperating right now. Sometimes it's like that. 3, so granny cluster. Now I'm going to look for that next space. Yarn over, 3 double crochets in for a granny cluster in between here. And then now this pulls us to the end of our row. You're going to keep going for however many you have, but you're going to, when you get to the end of your row, you're going to notice that there was a space between the granny cluster and where we turned, okay? We are going to put just 1 double crochet in that very last space. So I'm going to yarn over, go in there, yarn over, pull up, 1 double crochet. And this is going to create, if you would, our straight ends going all the way up, okay? Once we have that last double crochet in there, we're simply going to chain 4, 2, 3, 4, okay? And now we're going to turn. And then we're going to start the row just like we did on our last one. We are going to skip over the first space here, but we want to go between the 2 granny clusters for the first official granny cluster space, which is over here. And then now I'm going to granny cluster into that space. And then I continue on just like I did on the last row. So our row 3 is our repeat for the rest of the blanket. And you're just going to continue making this however long you would like. Now the next step to do is to create our tassels and to attach them. So that's going to be the next thing I show you. So my tassels coming down are about 7 inches long. To achieve that, what I did was I used a simple book to wrap my yarn around to get these to be all the same consistent size. Now my book in this case, if I go around once, all the way around, it's about 20 inches around. So if you make even a piece of cardboard that's going to be 10 inches long, or just use a book, it doesn't have to be exactly, the same size here. So if it's a little shorter, a little longer, totally fine. And then what I did was I wrapped around loosely. So I started here at the bottom and I went around and I'm wrapping 8 times around. So I'm going to get 8 strands around my book. So I got to count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So that then my last one ends at the bottom as well, so that these 2 ends are there. And then I simply cut off the end. Okay. Now what I have is if you would, a size here. So I grabbed at the top and I pulled this off. Okay. And I put a tassel on each one of my peaks. So I'm going to grab my sample back. Here it is that we just created here in the video. So I'm going to get this out of the way. And you're going to do this on both ends. Oops. Okay, that left. And notice that I'm holding this at the top of where I was. So I'm going to go where my first valley was here. And I am simply going to pull this through. Now, you can use your fingers to pull it through, or you could use your crochet hook if you wanted to pull it through, if that's easier. Okay. And then all I did was I pulled this through, and then I took the bottom and I pulled it through like this. Okay. So, and then I made it tight. And then this is, if you would, the back side. This would be the front side. So you're going to want to go from the same size each side each time. Now, once you have this in place, then all you're going to do is you're going to go to the bottom of your loops here, and you're going to elongate this out, and you're just going to cut so that they're all the same size. Make sure you go through each one of them. And that's it. And there you have your tassel attached. And it kind of like makes it that, if you would, that boho type of inspired look. So that brings us to the end of our tutorial. Thank you so much for sticking around. I appreciate you following along with me. I hope you found this helpful. So I look forward to seeing you in my next video.